Live in Toronto where the SARS virus got world-scale attention. That's because the only people who died outside of Asia from that virus were in Canada, and most of them were in Toronto. With only 44 people dying in total in Canada, it had a huge impact on our city. We lost a lot of tourism, we lost millions of dollars, but most importantly, we saw a lot of stigma and racism towards Chinese people. It's important that we do not repeat those racist notions that happened here in Toronto, and we all need to be aware of this when we talk about the current coronavirus. On our social media channels, we have seen lots of people saying things like, "This always happens in China," and relating it a lot to the types of foods that Chinese people eat. But it's important to remember that Western food practices are what created mad cow disease, and also Western meat consumption has created a big issue with antibiotic resistance. We need to listen to and trust public health professionals, and we need to not overreact, and we need to not use this as an excuse to be racist.
Wokeness is more important than your safety, my friends. This was some videos making the rounds over the weekend, people sharing this all over social media in response to the coronavirus outbreak, which is obviously in China right now. I think under 10,000 cases and under 200 deaths, but it could grow very rapidly. Here's the truth. We need to be able to speak about what caused this and where the risk factors are without people thinking that this is about whether or not there's some cultural offense given. By the way, there's nobody is hearing about this and being racist against, or I mean, when I say nobody, let me step back from that for a second. The conversation is not about random morons on the internet who are racist, not just against Chinese people, but will be racist against any people. Yeah, those people are always going to be around. They're morons. But we do have to understand if there was, if this is going to continue to be a problem, is there a food source or a way of handling certain food products, animal products in this case, that leads to what could be a pandemic? We want to stop that thing from happening. And when people's lives are at stake, when their health is at stake, all of a sudden they get a little bit more uneasy. Not some libs are still crazy, but a little more uneasy about, we don't want to be culturally insensitive. They mentioned SARS. SARS comes from, and they did analysis of this, SARS comes from the practice in a part of China from eating the civet cat, which is, I guess, a type of wild cat, and they eat it, and that's where SARS came from. So it does matter that there are certain practices, and there are these videos that are making the rounds right now of what we consider really kind of an exotic meat market, I suppose, in Wuhan, which is where that's ground zero of this coronavirus outbreak. By the way, I wonder, people have been, this is for real, people have been doing searches on Corona beer and virus a lot now because there are people that think that they're most. I remember the first day I said, it's got nothing to do with. Sure enough, this is not a well-named virus. I'd be willing to bet, and this is an aside to the bigger concerns here, that you might actually see a little bit of a drop in Corona sales because of this, because that's just the way people, coronavirus, and I don't know. I remember the band Anthrax, after the anthrax scare in this country, was really upset about that situation. So this can happen. But this storyline that we're hearing now, that you can't discuss the practices in the food practices in China and how it affects us. First of all, it is true that most the flu virus that we're worried about year in and year out, new strains of flu virus do tend to come out of livestock and animal food handling processes in China. This is the truth. This is where it often, bird flu, swine flu, these things, they come out of China. So that's real. And for him to, this is a moment where, let's make this about cultural criticism in some way. He brought up mad cow disease. I think, I'm trying to, how many people have actually been killed by mad cow disease? It's like a handful. I think four people in the United States have died of mad cow disease ever. So to say we're responsible for mad cow disease is kind of like, well, and I'm pretty sure you also have to eat like the brains of the cow for that to be an issue. So, yeah, we handle our produce and our livestock very, very hygienically in comparison to what is done in some other countries. When you see the video in Wuhan of this market where they have bats and they have, big boa constrictors, and they've got rats and dogs in cages, and they're eating all these things. These are all for human consumption, and it's just sort of laid out on tables, and it's not a hygienic practice. Okay, it's just not. So we're not putting down any individual. We're trying to find ways to avoid pandemic disease from happening. But in the wokeness world of the left in this country, better to say that, our use of antibiotics in animals is equivalent to people eating what may be contaminated bats or drinking bat soup. Which I got to tell you, there are some things that I'd be willing to be a little risky in terms of giving it a shot. You will never catch me eating bat anything. On the list of animals, as we've discussed, bats are very low on the what I'm willing to eat.